right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to April's edition of Kubernetes Meet Our Contributors. My name is Paris. I work at Google. I have an awesome panel for you today. If you are coming to us from the West Coast like I am, you are bright and early at 7:30 in the morning. Hello to everyone around the world, wherever you are, if you're listening in right now. What this is, if you've tuned in for the first time and you're like, I have no idea the link that I just clicked on Twitter. What is this? Who are these people's faces? What we do here is we help our upstream Kubernetes contributors with questions that they have, whether they're new contributors or current contributors in their journey. We have different levels in community membership for upstream contributing. What that means is our decision makers here. So people that are reviewing code, approving code, and doing all kinds of fun stuff with the community and helping out our upstream. These people come from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of companies and have all kinds of experiences that they can and want to share with you. So this is a super cool show. You're allowed to ask anything you want. If you want to know something about our contributors, feel free to ask. If you want to know about their journey, or if you'd like to know even maybe a technical question and see if they can tackle that, like why is your test flaking? That's always a favorite. So let's get started. First things first, we do have a code of conduct, of course, that we adhere to. Please be excellent to each other, whether you are asking or answering questions on many of our channels. And that brings us to, where are those channels? Those channels are on Slack mainly. It's Meet Our Contributors, hashtag Meet Our Contributors on slack.kates.io if you need an invite there. Of course, I'll also take direct messages there. My screen name is Paris that you see on Zoom right now. And that's if you'd like to remain anonymous, which is perfectly fine, or publicly ask in chat. And you can see that we already have quite a few questions queued up for today. Probably so many so that I think we're probably full for this session, but don't worry, we have another session at 1 o'clock, and we'll have our storage crew on there doing a CSI code base store and some other really cool fun stuff. So with that said, let's do some intros. Valerie, why don't you go first?
Hi, I'm Valerie. I'm a new contributor to Kubernetes. So I've been using Kubernetes for quite a while, but only in the last couple months have I started dabbling in contributing upstream.
Bob.
Yep. My name is Bob Gillen. I'm a research cloud administrator for the University of Michigan. I've been contributing to Kubernetes since, I think, late 2017 now, but I've been using it for quite a while. Both myself and my coworker, Jeff, who's also usually on these things, or in office hours, we've been playing around with Kubernetes and been involved since the 0.2, 0.4 days.
This is going to be a good one. Jeff and Bob are special to us in contributor experience. So, all right. And Valerie, where are you working right now? And do they support your upstream endeavors?
I'm working at Lyft right now. So upstream for me is still mostly a hobby, but there is some intersection. Like I do SIG meetings on work time. We fix some bugs upstream occasionally. It's kind of cool to be like the expert on how that all works.
Oh, that is awesome. What kind of questions do you usually get?
Usually stuff around like the architecture or like community structure and how things like, hey, we want to get this out. What does that actually look like in terms of like the release structure and so on?
Very cool. So you think that benefits your upstream involvement benefits just kind of like the day-to-day Kubernetes work that you do?
I think so, yeah. It also helps me understand what I'm working with a lot better as I kind of work on building stuff on top of the platform.
Cool. So tell me about some of the first interactions that you've had with upstream. Like, how did you jump in? Like, what were some of the first interactions like? Was it mailing list? Was it SIG meetings? Take me through that a little bit.
It was actually KubeCon Barcelona. I wound up meeting a lot of current contributors and kind of, it felt like a bit of a wall had been broken down. Like, we know that it's always people building open source, but at the same time, it's kind of just a bunch of icons. And I've been interested in building distributed systems for a long time. And I kind of just thought, okay, this is like a very accessible and welcoming community that's working on stuff that I find really fascinating to use and find the workings of very fascinating. maybe I can actually help here.
Very cool. Bob, what were some of your first interactions with the upstream community?
When I actually got like much more involved was honestly thanks to George. That's back in 2017, where he was just like, "You've been doing this enough. Come to the contributor summit at I think that was in Austin. I think so." And that sort of leapfrogged me into contributing quite a bit more, helping with like office hours and some of the other things. And then I just sort of springboarded off that into mostly in the contributor experience area, just doing little bits of everything here and there, and putting out the occasional bash fire.
Thank you for your firefighter skills. And yes, George is online and awesome and sick, unfortunately, today, but he is keeping the YouTube stream running for us and making sure that I'm coming through crystal clear for y'all. So hope we are. Thanks to George for all his work with the community. All right, so let's see. First question, let's go from Jiffy, actually. What's one area of the project you feel needs help?
I would say that, and this is something that SIGPM is making a lot of progress on, kind of having a strong overall vision of how everything's working together. It's often joked about that Kubernetes might become OpenStack v2. We're definitely reaching a very high amount of feature complexity that even if you configure your system in a simple way, you still have to know about so many bizarre edge cases. So I think the more that we can streamline what functionality we're going for and why, the kind of more successful we can be in the long term.
Just sort of piggybacking up that a little bit, SIGPM, just general project management, we have a lot of good developers and a lot of good contributors, but sort of herding all the cats can be quite the challenge. And a little bit more direction there would certainly help. There's other things that have really helped sort of drive how we're developing features, like the refinement of the KEP process or Kubernetes enhancement proposal. But it's definitely something that like could use a bit more help long term.
For sure. And in the ambiguity that is your first PR, talk to me and Valerie a little bit about your experiences there. Like what was if you could go back and tell yourself one thing, like what would that one thing be, and what would that be a good tip for another new contributor that's trying to land their first PR?
Doing a first PR definitely feels like it's quite a high uphill battle if you're not familiar with the code base, because you have to learn so much to even achieve the simplest thing. Like I think my first PR was just reorganizing some test assets. Definitely try to pick something as easy as possible to really ease your way in. And don't be afraid to kind of ask for help, ask for context, and pester people for review. My first PR that I did was actually merged very recently. This might be doing a lot of work since then, just because it was hard to get eyes on it.
Out of curiosity, was that a PR or an issue type of like good first issue or help wanted? Or did you sort of discover it yourself? Okay.
Yeah, so that was very useful going through the good first issue and help wanted for my first like 2-3 issues, because I didn't really have the context, what would be very difficult and what would be some learning plus 5 minutes work.
Did you wind up popping into any like the channels and asking for guidance or anything like that on those?
I have more recently, but it's a little bit hard to get that information from people sometimes. Some people have been super helpful with that though.
Nice.
Yeah. What about going to SIG meetings? Do you feel like has that ever unblocked you in any way?
Definitely. I'm involved with a couple SIGs, mostly SIG network, and it's been really helpful to kind of always have the context of what's going on to actually talk to people. Like now I'm kind of trying to focus a bit on kube proxies. So now that that's an established thing, I can speak up in the meetings. People are messaging me with tickets saying, hey, do you want to work on this? So it's a way to get much more of a foothold in the project.
So if we get a kube proxy code base to our request, are you up for the challenge?
Not yet, maybe in another month.
Awesome. All right. No, we'll hold you to that. All right. All right. Valerie's next visit, everyone, is a kubeproxy code base tour. All right. Cool. All right. So then let's get back to Jeff's next question, and then we'll get on to Nikita's. As a contributor, what's one tool that you could not live without? And I want to tack on a question. What's one tool that you wish you knew before that you know now? Because we do have quite a few tools, tips and tricks and platforms and communication lines, etc.
For me, the tool that I can live without is Slack. Just so much communication goes on through Slack.
What about you, Valerie?
The tool that I definitely can't manage without now is Kind, Kubernetes, and Docker. It's a lifesaver for me to be able to test stuff.
And they're looking for contributors, y'all. FYI, it's Kind, K-I-N-D. That's the repo name.
Under Kubernetes SIGs.
Yes, under Kubernetes SIGs in our many 150 plus GitHub repositories. Bob, what's some of your favorite channels on Slack that are helpful?
I'm in far too many for my own good, but really it's mostly the ones that the Slacks I'm closer and involved in. So SIG contributor experience, SIG release is really nice just to sort of keep an eye on things. SIG testing ops are also good places just to get an idea of sort of the overall state of our CI infrastructure. If something happens to be going longer, or if there might be a problem, keeping an eye in there will generally alert you that there might be something else going on. It's also a good place to chime in when there might be a problem, just to let other people know.
Very cool. Yes, I definitely agree with that. I also think I want to tack on Slack admins. If y'all need anything out there in the world, Slack admins are there for you. And of course, Contributor Summit channel. If anybody is ever going to a Contributor Summit and want to lurk in there and get the latest information about the summits. Valerie, what about you? What are some channels that you think are super useful on Slack?
Aside from like the obvious SIGs I'm involved in channels, definitely echo what Bob said about SIG testing. Every now and then there is a testing and CI issue, and it's nice to not be totally blocked and banging my head against the wall. Other than that, Kubernetes Dev is super helpful for just answering pretty basic questions about like building or how the project works. I leaned on it a lot in my first couple of weeks, and now it's kind of, it makes me feel proud to actually be able to answer questions in that and kind of chip in again.
Yay!
One other channel that I completely blanked on a moment ago is the new PR reviews channel. So if you have a PR that you're looking for to get some extra eyes on, hop in there and just give a shout, and I'm sure someone will pop over and take a look at it.
Yeah, that's a great channel.
All right. And then Nikita has a slew of questions for us, and all of them are wonderful. One question, how do you think people can ramp up the contributor ladder? And for folks that don't know what our contributor ladder is, it would be non-member and member, that would be to the GitHub repository, and then member, reviewer, approver, and sub-project owner. And actually, before we even go there, Bob, do you want to explain a little bit about what owners files are, just in case people are listening who are like, what the heck are they even talking about to begin with? Like, what's a reviewer and approver?
So sort of the reviewer and approver system is a way that like certain users can be poked that are sort of owners of that specific section of the code base. Usually when you create an issue or PR against, or create a PR against something, there's a bot like K8's CI bot that will try and like automatically assign people from those lists to be able to both sort of review your PR and then approve it. Everything sort of goes through a two-stage process of where reviewers can review it, but for it to actually be merged, it must be approved by an approver in the list. And usually these will sort of come back to like various SIGs. So you can see in the example, actually, can you pop back over to that owner's file? So in this, anyone from the top list, Paris, George, Jace, Ihor, Jiffy, my coworker, myself, we can sort of review the work in here, but for it to actually get merged, it must be approved by either George, Paris, or anyone in the SIG contributor experience leads.
Bob, did you just summon Ihor?
Apparently.
Yeah, Eeyore was supposed to join us earlier and unfortunately could not join us on time, but he is here now. Apparently we've summoned him via owner's file. That's how good our automation has gotten.
You don't even make a PR against it. It just sort of happens.
We do have a CNCF will handle this Slack emoji too. So it's just like, it's so perfect.
It's like singing in the mirror 3 times and then suddenly
Eeyore just pops up.
Thank you for the great introduction.
Yes. Eeyore, why don't you give yourself a quick introduction really quick?
Hi, my name is Ihor. I'm a developer advocate at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and I'm also one of the co-chairs of SIGPM, and I'm here to help you with all your contributor-related questions.
Yay. And the new background that you have looks beautiful, gorgeous, clean, like it looks like you just moved, right?
I did. I'm not in the cave anymore.
I know, it's so wonderful. Congratulations. Oh my gosh, now I'm in a cave. Now my lights just went off.
It's a little echoey in there though.
I know. Here we go.
It's still empty. I'm gonna fix this soon.
All right. Now we were digging into Nikita's question about how folks can grow up the contributor ladder. And we were digging into, I said digging in twice. I don't like that. And we were getting into what owner's files are to begin with and why people even want to grow into a ladder. So why would people want to grow into an owner's file or grow through the contributor ladder with Kubernetes? Like what are some value adds or what are some reasons why or benefits?
Does that bounce back to me?
Take it.
Okay. Usually, once you've been added to sort of as a reviewer or into an owner's file, that means you've sort of established yourself in that section. And that sort of means that, the bots and other things that can automatically assign essentially work to you to like review PRs and things like that. You've sort of essentially become trusted enough to evaluate the code base and evaluate the PRs within that subsection. And sort of once you've participated enough in a certain section, you have enough PRs, you'll get promoted to a reviewer. You continue to review things, and then you can be promoted to an approver. So that way, you can facilitate more people contributing to the project and getting all that stuff in faster.
Eeyore, what's your take?
Well, I second Bob mostly. The biggest reason, one of the biggest reasons why people would like to be presented in the owner's file is that you may consider that as some kind of like community recognition and promotion. So I'm not speaking here about like the corporate style promotion, but it's more about the wide community recognition and so on. So if you are in the owner's file, that means that this area of community absolutely respects you and relies on you on that some specific items that you can do there. So don't be confused again with some kind of like corporate promotion where like that it shouldn't be your primary goal just to be added to the owner's file and that's all. But it's like more about the level of recognition within the community and the respect from other community members.
Valerie, what are some of your goals as a contributor that like of right now, like for in the short term?
In the short term, I'm still working on becoming a reviewer for a couple of segments of the code base.
That's awesome. How do you feel, like, what are some steps that you feel like you're going to take in order to get there? And what's been your experience in the past with either other open source projects or watching others go through this process?
I find it a bit difficult because by nature of being kind of a very huge and distributed community, there's not often a very clear on-ramp. You kind of have to wander around and get lost and figure things out for yourself. So right now I'm trying to focus more on specific areas just because I have limited time and try to seek out stuff that I can review and help with that is contributing to those areas, even if it doesn't come up right away.
And then same question for Bob and yours along the lines of, if you like you're a current member and you're looking to become a reviewer, what are steps that you would take in order to start that path?
I would start.
Go for it. You go.
All right. That's the transcontinental network leg. So the first step that you should do if you are a regular member but you'd like to be an approver or reviewer mentioned in some kind of owners file or some specific subdirectory of the code base, you should understand everything that happens in that code base, and you should understand all the processes and all the information that is placed there. So you are the person who is responsible for all the actions that can happen or cannot happen in that specific area. So understanding on what's happening there, what should you do, what should you not do, what should other people do in that specific area is like the top zero requirement for you to grow successfully to the person who is mentioned in there. In the owner's file as an approver or reviewer.
And then Bob, it's safe.
For me, it'd be, if you start focusing on a specific area, you can also look for issues that target the area. One thing for me recently was just the communications directory in the community repo. I wound up just rewriting a bunch of the guides for the YouTube Slack guidelines, things like that. And after I'd contributed enough to it, it was then felt like I could be a reviewer for that. And I was recently added to the reviewers file, like I think last month, or added as a reviewer in the owners file last month.
Congrats again. All right. Now Nikita has a different question. If you're starting to work on a new area of the project, what kind of workflow do you use? For instance, do you first look at the issue list? Do you ask on Slack for issues? Do you start lurking in meetings? What's your first attempt? And Valerie, I think we kind of heard this from you earlier as to what yours was. Did you have any like, I guess, workflow there as far as like, all right, let's try to sig meetings first?
It wasn't anything too structured. Usually I tried to kind of get more context about the code base in general before diving into just skimming code before going into a specific issue. So that might be like going through Kubernetes docs, especially a lot of areas I haven't really touched as an end user, so the details aren't familiar. Once I kind of understand what it's actually doing, that's a good time to read code. And once I've kind of got a rough idea of what the code tree of a component is, then it's a lot easier to dive into specific issues.
What were some of those docs that you just mentioned? I'm curious.
So the official Kubernetes docs can be a little bit messy to find things, but there's gold mines of information in there about how different components work, especially with stuff like the blog posts where like a SIG member will do a deep dive in something.
That is a good resource as well that we haven't talked about too. Bob, what about you?
For me, it's like I would start sort of piggybacking up that is focus on the specific code base that you're interested in and then definitely get involved with the SIG. And a good place to sort of get an idea of the pulse of what's going on recently in the SIG is to read their meeting notes. And that will sort of get you up to date on sort of everything that's been going on and give you a little bit of the history behind sort of the direction of things and where they're going. And if you want to, like, if you see they're actively working on possibly implementing a new feature or possibly like adding tests, that gives you something else to sort of springboard off of and, tackle an issue.
What's an area of the project that you see contributors struggling with that maybe there doesn't need like we either have documentation for it or there's other resources for them? Like, what are some common hiccups that you see that contributors are having?
I guess one thing, actually, a lot of people think that like when coming to this new, to contribute, they have to do stuff to, the Kubernetes repo. And they don't actually realize that there's this whole slew of other sub-projects and other things that are all involved in this grand old thing of Kubernetes. And sometimes it's a lot easier to actually jump into a sub-project where, there aren't necessarily other release restrictions that there are with Kubernetes. It will usually have a smaller team, people that might be able to respond more quickly. But getting involved with those as a good sort of first basis gets you, interacting with the community in a more, I would say, personal manner, and can possibly sort of springboard back to, working on the like main Kubernetes project. Let's see, like a lot of the stuff with KubeBuilder and some of the other things in Kubernetes SIGs are sort of focused on, building your own controllers and getting an idea of how that entire sort of system works. Gives you sort of the fundamentals to possibly jump back and start doing other things in the main, Kubernetes. So that turned a bit more ranty than I intended.
No, that was good. That was good. I actually took some notes down for myself for later. What about you?
I would start with README to that specific area where I'm interested in, either as a consumer or as a contributor. So always start with the README, and if the README doc is not complete enough, you can submit more data to it, understanding the code base and the content of the specific repo, for example, and it will be your first great contribution to this code base, to this README. And after you'll figure out what's happening in this repo, for example, you can also continue working with the SIG, for example, if this project or sub-project is directly governed by a specific SIG, so you can interact with SIG on the meetings, pull up the meeting notes, work with them with the SIG on a Slack channel, and so on. But again, like the first item that you should do if you are interested in some new area for yourself, please start with the documentation, which is the README file on GitHub for the trip or for that sub-project.
Good responses. Thank you. And one question that I don't think I asked y'all yet, I think we have in prior episodes, but is Kubernetes the first open source project that you've contributed to? If not, what else? Valerie, you want to start?
It's the first one I've contributed in such depth. When I was younger, I used to be involved in the Ubuntu community a bit, but that was a lot more like QA and kind of bug research focused.
Bob?
For me, it was not much stuff that's actually like public, but in the research software engineering side, since I live and breathe academia, it's all things that's not very discoverable in Bitbucket.
And then, I know I've asked you this question on prior episodes, but for our audience today.
So actually, Kubernetes, as for Valerie, Kubernetes was my first project with so huge depth. I used to work with other open source communities, specifically with OpenStack, before I joined Kubernetes. And actually, one of the reasons why I was so excited about working closely with Kubernetes project was that fact, was understanding of that fact that Kubernetes community is way easier, is Kubernetes community as an open source project is way easier for the newcomers to contribute to rather than any other open source project that I had experience with.
And funny that y'all are relatively new to this, because the last contributor experience survey that we did, 25% of those are also new as well. So I don't know if that is a genuine representation of our community, if about 25% are new to open source and upstream contributing. But for the folks that are new to open source, now that you're not new anymore, what are some things that are major differences that you see between obviously developing for your job and developing for upstream? And you can talk about like either cultural norms or technical differences. What are some like major things that you think that maybe people just don't realize? I guess that's where I'm going with that.
Can I start?
Yes.
I would say that the major technical difference of Kubernetes as an open source project compared to other projects that I had experience with was GitHub. So some other open source projects that I had experience with, they used to use some more complex systems and not so easy to understand for the regular person from outside of their open source development world, like Garrett or like anything similar. I didn't want to say anything bad about Garrett, but I would say that development on GitHub and understanding on what's happening in this open source world is way easier to it's way easier with GitHub rather than with any other system that acts as a like code-based management system and so on. So for me, Kubernetes was my first project, was my first major project, was my first major open source project, but probably I may consider myself as a veteran because I'm around with 3.5 years with Kubernetes. I did my first PR to Kubernetes in late 2015. It was 1.0.6 release cycle, so it was like a long time ago. So one of the reasons why Kubernetes was so easy for me to get started with as a contributor was, first of all, the easiness of GitHub comparing to possibly some different systems where the online collaboration could happen. And also, I would say that, for example, Slack, comparing with RC, we all know that Slack has its own limitations, and sometimes it's not so easily manageable, especially for Slack admins and for some users. But comparing with some solutions like IRC, Slack is way easier for the consumers. And actually, when Kubernetes community decided to use Slack a few years ago as the primary tool for the interaction, it was also the wise decision because it was also way easier for the people from outside the world just to install the Slack application on their mobile phone or on their laptop and just start typing.
So, I mean, using GitHub too also brings like new cultural norms that you probably had to adhere to as far as like how things get done and how business is done and how decisions are made and things like that, I'd imagine, right?
Yes.
Bob, what about you? What are some of the differences from like open source to like day job work?
Most of my day job work is honestly operations related, at least these days. More process management, and I spin up and manage several Kubernetes clusters for our researchers here at the University of Michigan. and I work with several other researchers at other academic institutions. It honestly doesn't have too much to do with any of my upstream work. And that's sort of been an interesting relationship with my job. But
yeah, talk about that a little bit. Like, how do you juggle both? I mean, knowing that like they're two different sort of responsibilities, whereas like if you're developing on Kubernetes and then you want to develop upstream Kubernetes, it kind of like, with the exception of time, goes hand in hand. How do you juggle? What are some things that you do to juggle?
Thankfully, I'm in a position where they don't care too much about something being done during the day, as long as the task gets done. So I will refer to like work and Kubernetes work, and they can sort of be intermingled throughout the day. I can jump on this, I can hop on office hours, or any of the other SIG meetings, and work doesn't care too much about that for me, as long as I can still get the actual work done. So that might mean on a weekend I'm doing something for work, just that way I ensure I have enough free time during the week to participate in all this other fun stuff. It's complicated.
Valerie, what were some of the differences that you saw between going from like day job development to open source development?
I think kind of the mentality and the priorities have been the biggest difference for me in a really positive way. In most open source communities, certainly in Kubernetes, there's a huge like client and end user focus that, well, every company wants to have that. I don't think that every developer winds up having that. But in open source, we care so much about the quality of what we're putting out. We would kind of rather work on bug fixes than churn out features. And yeah, there's that very kind of heavy emphasis of we want to get this done right, and kind of less of a what's my personal stake here.
Very cool. And while I dig through some DMs here, do you all have any questions for each other? Well, Bob and Valerie play Overwatch together. So y'all, if you would like to talk about Overwatch, now's your time.
There's a good chunk of us in the Kubernetes community that are also gamers, and we like to do other things together. Valerie, my coworker Jeff, George, Solly, DirectX Man on Slack, several other people, Ben the Elder.
Well, that's actually a good intro into like, how do you prevent burnout?
Mandatory Overwatch hour.
Is that okay?
I wish we're behind on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eeyore, what about you? How do you prevent burnout? What are some things that you do to get away and to take your mind away and things like that?
Well, it's complicated,
Yeah.
but sometimes I try to find some solutions with it. The major reason why I almost never felt a burnout about this community in like around 4 years when I'm active here is that because a few years ago when I joined the Kubernetes community, Kubernetes as an open source project was my passion, and it was started like my contributions had started as my let's call this hobby project because it was outside of my day job before I joined CNCF. Now, Kubernetes and other cloud-native open source projects are a part of my day job, but I'm still highly passionate about that, and I see no reason why I can't even spend my personal time working on some items that are not directly related to my daily responsibilities.
Valerie, what about you? What are some things that you do to prevent burnout?
Because working on Kubernetes is like 80-90% a hobby for me, I do have the luxury of stepping back when I need to. Other than that, I just try to space stuff out as much as I can and make sure that there's always that time to do something that I find kind of enriching and relaxing, as well as just the basics like, have I eaten properly? Have I slept well enough? Because things go downhill very quickly if anything essential gets neglected.
Yes, I call that hangry. And when it escalates, it gets fierce. So no, I am definitely on the sleep and food train, as basic as that sounds. That is so essential. I forget all the time, like just being in front of this box for 12 hours and like, oh, I didn't eat. That's not good. So yeah, no, eating and sleeping is very good, y'all. Trust me. Uh, all right. That actually is it. I think we ran through all of the questions. I'm gonna give one last call for questions in the chat here. Anybody have anything that they wanted to wrap up with? Maybe if you have one tip to give to any contributor out there, maybe even like the ones that are attempting to build locally. Any tip that you'd like to give? Bob, you start.
Get involved and ask questions early. People are generally very happy to answer them, especially if it's trying to work towards a specific issue you have. If you can like link the issue or something like that you're working on. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I guess is the big one.
Eeyore,
Big
what about
plus
you?
one. Big plus one to all that Bob said.
And use plus one. That's a thing.
And use plus one.
Yes, no. Community members, please plus one each other. That's what community is about. If you see a good idea, plus one them. If you see something in GitHub that looks awesome, plus one them. If you see something, say thanks. Valerie, what's your tip?
Communicating and coordinating definitely also gets a plus one from me. I spent a very long time on a test ticket, and the reason why I couldn't make my test work is because the behavior had actually regressed. And it took me quite a while to reach out to the SIG and figure out that the reason why I couldn't get things to work is because they did not. Other than that, probably definitely focus on trying to do something specific and do it very well. We have such a huge project and huge code base that it'll be very slow and difficult to try to learn and do everything.
Good tips, y'all. Good session. I think I actually see somebody typing in Slack right now. I'm going to give them, oh, they're not typing anymore. All right, that was last call. All right. We have one more session left today. For those that are still listening, we have our storage crew on. And we also have the Emeritus Minikube maintainer, Matt Rickard, on as well at 1 o'clock. So that'll be a good session. I hope the panelists will join us for that one and ask questions in the chat and also answer any questions that anybody else has for y'all in the chat as well. But that's it for us today at this hour. Thank you so much to our panelists, and we are going to cut the stream. Adios.